Welcome to Pleasure Uprising. I'm Dr. Laura Juergens, intimacy coach, somatic practitioner, and your guide to getting out of your head and into your body, your desire, and your real capacity for connection. This show is for people who are done performing and ready to actually feel it. Let's go. Hey, welcome to today's episode. We are talking about what happens when the world never felt safe and what that does to desire. So this is part 2 in the attachment wounds series and how attachment wounds and childhood attachment patterns are related to our erotic desires. This is about the safety wound. And, so let's set the scene, right? Like someone looks totally fine from the outside. They are often calm. They may be kind of intellectual or spiritual. They may be a healer or a helper. But in bed, something is off. They're not quite there. They may be dissociated or up in their head. Or they can only fully arrive in their body when something incredibly intense is happening, like slightly dangerous or really at the edge. And the interesting paradox here is that the person who most needs safety to access desire is sometimes the one who's actually drawn to danger or most checked out. And that makes complete sense once we understand what's underneath. And this is also, if you haven't listened to the first intro episode on attachment wounds and desires, please do that. This is building on that, and that will set the scene and give you some context to understand that none of this that we're talking about is fixed or like a life sentence or, pathological or, a horrible situation. It's all workable. And there's gifts from all of these wounds. As much as we don't talk about those kinds of things, we often in culture, we talk about trauma right now, but we often fail to talk about post-traumatic growth. And I think that's a disservice because there is an amazing potential for pleasure after trauma and amazing potential for growth and connection. And so we're going to talk about this particular early childhood wound today around safety and how it manifests in adults. You might recognize it in yourself or a partner, and just explore this with me today. And stick with me because I think that you'll find this really interesting. And as I said in the intro episode, I think it's worth repeating here is many of us have multiple wounds, multiple attachment wounds, and they manifest in different ways in our life. And so it's really worth understanding the sort of patterns. But, of course, they're also, and as much as we kind of categorize things, and I'm going to categorize things today, I also want to recognize that everybody's experience is unique and it is yours, right? And no category can really capture that, but it can help us to understand how we are, normal and not to pathologize ourselves, but to understand the coping mechanisms that we have acquired and how helpful they have been in our lives. Because this safety wound, all of these wounds, they are coping mechanisms that have been really important to help keep us safe and sane amidst a world that sometimes doesn't feel safe and sane. So this is I'm calling this the safety wound, but in other, so it exists in all kinds of different psychological traditions. So in Hakomi, this is called the sensitive withdrawn. And in neuroaffective touch and the neuroaffective relational model, it's called the connection survival style. In the Somatica Institute, one of my training agencies, and also, of course, I was trained in neuroaffective touch, in Somatica, it's called the unsafe wound. And we're going to talk about specifically what it is and where it comes from. Then we're going to talk about what it feels like on the inside, how it shows up in relationship dynamics and how it shapes our erotic emotions, and what it looks like to move on this. Like, how does healing feel, and what does that look like when you have this type of wound? So, what it is and where it comes from, let's start there. This is the earliest in the developmental cycle. This is like womb through infancy. So from conception through early infancy, before language, before memory as we know it. And the unmet need here is a sense that the world is safe to exist in, that the body is a safe place to be. And where it comes from is typically from any one of these things or a combination of them. So traumatic prenatal experiences, a traumatic birth, early separation from a birth mother, such as with adoption or maternal death, parental anxiety or depression, domestic chaos, domestic abuse that the mother is experiencing, extended separations early in life, such as being in a NICU, for example, if you were premature, environments that were overwhelming and unpredictable, or generational trauma. And oftentimes there's nothing any parent did consciously or intentionally, but this can still happen. We can get a sense that the world is not safe to exist in. And the fetus or baby's solution, if the body isn't safe, is to leave it. And disassociation becomes the primary coping tool. Living in thought, spirit, intellect, anywhere but the direct experience of the body. This is a brilliant survival adaptation. It is not pathological. It is actually what is needed at that age to exist. And so across the frameworks, Comey calls it sensitive withdrawn. There's an older Freudian label called schizoid, which is so pathologizing. And I hate pretty much everything Freudian. I'm full disclosure here. I am really biased against Freudian stuff. I think it's not useful. And in so many ways, I'm sure yes, of course, there are some things that were useful that come out of it. But for me, like psychoanalytical approaches are so limited that they are actually harmful in many cases. So anyway, you won't hear me using any Freudian terms very often, but we have different traditions, but the same consistently observed pattern. It is a pattern of dissociation as a primary coping mechanism. And this is not fringe. This is actually really, really common. These kinds of things happen to babies all the time. And it is a normal way of coping with the world feeling unsafe at an early age. What it feels like from the inside is having difficulty fully inhabiting the body. For some people, it's kind of a floating quality. They feel checked out. But some of us are actually so dissociated, we don't even know that we could feel something in the body. And I will say that was me. So this version that I had, I was so dissociated, I didn't know that I was dissociated. I didn't know I was not in my body. And it's one of the characteristics you can often feel from the inside is a deep, almost overwhelming empathy for other people or animals. And it's a way of feeling things in for ourselves that actually belong to someone else. And there's not an easy filter. It's like feelings that you don't inhabit yourself are coming to you as reflections from others. And there's a tendency to look calm and fine even when something really big is happening. So this is not dishonesty. This is just dissociation. And so a lot of times these people are very good in a crisis. They may have a hard time accessing their own feelings directly and may know them kind of more theoretically, or they may be kind of in a constant state of bracing against them so that they don't feel flooded by them. Often tend to be drawn to things that feel bigger than the individual self. So spirituality, philosophy, creativity, intellectual pursuits, service to others, tendency to intellectualize or spiritually bypass themselves in the real world. And that's kind of the two tracks that you tend to see with the unsafe wound is it'll be either hyper intellectualizing or like a real focus on spirituality. And those are two ways of being outside the body. And that's what it's about. And underneath that apparent piece that you can sometimes see, especially with the really highly spiritualized people, is often a really deep current of pain, fear, or rage that is incredibly scary to access and often hard to name. So that's kind of what it feels like from the inside. And the way that it shapes our erotic emotions, if we have an unsafe wound, I've talked before about the resolution and repetition with agency pathways. And if those don't sound familiar, go back to the recent attachment episode 130, and the erotic emotions episode about psychological arousal, which is episode 5, way back when, and make sure you understand the basics before we go forward, because this will make so much more sense if you do that. So how these shape our erotic emotions. So in the resolution pathway, the erotic space becomes a place to finally be safe enough to fully arrive in the body. We may not know how to do it, but that's what we're longing for. Okay, so the core longing is to feel safe or held, contained, merged, seen, welcomed. Those are some of the different flavors of core erotic emotions that people who with an unsafe wound could be wanting, could be really desiring. Now, everybody's flavor is different. So you don't have to want all of those things. And if you do want some of those things, it doesn't necessarily mean you have this wound. But for most people if you identify with having an unsafe wound, a safety wound, there is oftentimes a really deep desire for one of those types of emotions. Safe, held, contained, merged, welcomed. And sometimes a sense that calm is like incredibly erotic. It's real. It's profound. It's the opposite of what culture often tells us sex should be based in the media. In the other pathway, repetition with agency, some people with a safety wound are actually drawn to like risky business, to intensity, to feelings like primal, dangerous, risky, and even unsafe. And that's the nervous system trying to metabolize a lack of safety early in life as an emotion that's safe to experience when we actually have choice and agency as adults. And in that sense, a lot of times people with a safety wound will actually have fantasies about feeling violated or used or taken in a chosen context that feels risky or dangerous, or exposed in some way that would otherwise you would think would feel unsafe. But when in chosen and in combination with chosen safety can actually feel really erotic. And so the critical thing there is that even when the desire is for risky or edgy play, a foundation of real safety has to be there first. Now, that's the case for everybody, but for these people especially. So you need enough felt safety in the relationship in order to actually open up, and in the structure of the sexy scene in order to actually open up the interest and availability to this intensity. And otherwise, the body can't be present. Now, the person may not realize that because they're used to the body not being present. So it's really important that they go very slowly and learn how to be in their body so that they can actually tell where their boundaries are, because these people oftentimes do not know where their body's boundaries are because they can't feel them. If you go to the Wheel of Erotic Emotions that I created, that's linked in my show notes and I have mentioned before, the emotions, the emotional territories that are really relevant there are safe or unsafe, calm, risky, seen, primal, wanted, merged, contained, and alive. Those are some of the emotional territories that you might be interested if you have this particular wound. And the way that it shows up in relationship dynamics is really useful to understand. So a partner may actually feel like there's kind of no one fully home. Like maybe there's a connection that happens and then it kind of disappears, or stuff never quite lands. The connection never quite lands. I know for me, I had a really hard time with eye contact until I healed enough of this wound to be able to feel really present and to actually feel like it was safe to be in my body. I had a hard time with eye contact. It can swing when you're in a relationship with this person. It can kind of swing between like intense closeness seeking and kind of a sudden retreat without a really obvious trigger to the partner. They can be highly sensitive to anything that reads as too much demand, too much intensity, too much expectation. And, as we said in bed, they may drift into dissociation. They may seem physically present while emotionally checked out. And they may genuinely not know what they want or need because real-time access to their internal signals isn't actually fully online. And I want to say too that this wound very commonly co-occurs with other ones that we're going to cover, and especially the dependency wound that we're going to cover later. So it's often not the whole story. But what movement looks like around this, what like healing looks like, is not getting rid of it. We never get rid of our early developmental wounds. We manage them, and we can kind of embrace them and learn how to deal with them. So what healing and movement looks like on this is, number one, coming back to the body, not as a project to force intellectually or spiritually, but gradually with your body's consent and very well paced to actually listen to the body. So the person may need to learn how to hear the body and that it's okay and safe to actually be present with it. So building enough felt safety in the body is step number one. Then there's also building enough felt safety in specific relationships. And so that really is helped along by having more embodiment. Then you can actually feel where your yeses and your nos are, where your maybes are, where you're, okay, we could try it, but I want to reserve the right that I might have a no here. Then you can, when somebody starts responding to that, when you know where you are and someone else can feel you're present, you can actually play with the connection with that other person. Another thing to do here is to start identifying which erotic emotions you're actually seeking. That wheel of erotic emotions can help you with that. And to practice asking directly for the conditions that help you be in your body. Safety, groundedness. What do you need for those things? Learning what they are and then asking for them rather than disappearing or going for intensity and just hoping that everything works out. So another thing, getting support is somatic work, 100%, particularly relevant. A lot of these people are going to therapy or spirituality and avoiding doing the body-based work. But the body-based work is actually what needs to happen here. So if the body has been a place that has felt dangerous, having a somatic practitioner who helps you get back into your body gradually is often the best first step. Okay, I hope that's been interesting and helpful. And we will continue this series with dependency wounds and how they affect our erotic emotions in the next one. And I'll see you here next time. Hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this show, I want to invite you to check out one of my favorite things that I've ever created. It's a free guide called Get Out of Your Head, a starter guide to releasing the pressure, shame, and shoulds around intimacy. It has 4 reflection exercises that go deeper than anything you'll find in a typical freebie, and most people feel a shift just after part 1. So go grab it at laurajurgens.com/guide. The link is in the show notes. And if you're ready to find out what your specific path looks like, I'd love to talk to you. Booking info is also in the show notes, and I will see you here next week.